Hi, everyone. I am incredibly happy and excited to be here with you today. It has been quite a long time coming, so welcome to my home for this conference. I'm really excited about the topic that we'll be going through today. Um, so we'll be talking through the role of design in shaping the future of innovation in Africa, and specifically looking at the question at hand that has been coming up in various design, even product developer circles, not just here in Kenya where I'm currently based, but across communities, is can we continue to design in a crisis? Like, do designers now need to, shuffle off and come back when life is back to normal, so to speak, or is there a role that designers can actually play in this space? Can we continue to design in a crisis and help to drive innovation? So I'll be giving examples from that work and cases that we've already seen, not just in this neck of the woods, but really across the board. Before we jump into all of that, a little bit about myself. I am a designer, currently running a multidisciplinary team of designers, developers, product managers, data scientists, researchers, business analysts at Spindle Design, where we partner with companies and entrepreneurs to bring new solutions to the African market. And this typically means leveraging a variety of skills in order to design and build new products. And this we do across various sectors. And so that has been our experience over the last couple of years. And this is just a little snapshot of some of the folks that we've worked with, some of the companies I've worked in, like iHub, and one of my favorites, Dalbeck Design. We've worked with startups like Fuzu. I guess it's no longer a startup now, or maybe it is, depending on your definition, to corporates like Safaricom, who brought us M-Pesa, and organizations in the development sector like Hivos, who are seeking to drive, social change and bring meaningful impact to our communities. And so we'll be drawing experience from working with a number of these partners. This is kind of like what my work on a day-to-day looks like. My work and experiences are really where I draw my inspiration for this talk from. And I spend a lot of my time with teams, talking to people in their communities, understanding them, their lives, the challenges that they face, what their perspectives are on different solutions, different challenges, and really understanding their lives in order to create meaningful products. And then with teams in creative co-design sessions to, find ways to take some of these learnings, make sense of them, and essentially be able to bring new solutions to market. Which brings me a little bit to my journey. I began my journey as a developer coding mobile applications, which led me to create my first startup, which was in the edtech space. And shortly after that, I saw another opportunity to bring technology to the fashion space. And so I began another startup, which we called Mavazi, and I was building the technology for both. But in the course of running the company, I discovered this elusive thing called design. And it really came from, I guess some of you know Mark Kamau, who I worked with at the iHub. And he was talking to us techies and was telling us about how we like to code in our mother's basements. And I was like, no, we don't have basements where we're from. So that probably doesn't apply to us. But this idea that you could understand the problem and understand people and understand the market before even writing a single line of code. And I was sold to that idea. And so what I did from that is to interrogate what design is. And it really made sense to me to be able to marry fundamental understanding of people and their problems and context, like we heard from Nancy yesterday, and this ability to bring solutions and make ideas real by writing code. And just that intersection made sense to me, and bringing, you know, like a business perspective to that. And so that set me on the journey that I'm now on, and has enabled me to have a broad array of experiences on the African continent and beyond, which I am very grateful for. This is a snapshot of some of the countries that we've worked in. Obviously traveled across a number of places in Africa and beyond, and we continue looking forward to similar opportunities. So, I mean, as you can imagine, while I am well adjusted to being indoors now as an introvert, I really love it. But I'm also looking forward to a time when we can all hopefully move around safely and be healthy and be in the same spaces together. I am a very community-centered person. Would love to see the community of designers on the continent as a whole grow, so that we can, you know, leverage the kind of expertise and experience that we have here in order to create solutions for ourselves. And to that end, I launched East Africa's first design and product conference last year, and the community from that has continued to grow. So that's just a little bit about myself. So again, today we'll be looking at the role of design in this crisis period, drawing on lessons from work throughout the crisis that we've seen and experienced, from different pockets, right? There's investors that are asking different questions about what it means to create products now, and looking to designers, looking to developers, looking to entrepreneurs for some of those answers, and the potential for design to play a decisive role in addressing some of our society's pressing challenges. So, I mean, just top of mind, the simple answer, the short answer to this question is, from my perspective, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt in my mind, yes, designers can continue to play a role, and actually should. And if anybody has a dissenting opinion or thinks that maybe designers do not have a role to play or should not have a role to play, or that role is continuing to change, I'd love to hear about how you guys are thinking about your role in your organizations, or how you see your roles changing in the ecosystem as a whole. And I actually can't see the chat on here, so but yeah, I will definitely come back to that. So what we need to get wise at really, really fast is the realization that design across sectors, across industries, is all fundamentally about behavior change. We are in this business of changing behavior through the different artifacts that we put out into the world, through different communication, through different nudges, right? It's all fundamentally about behavior change and how we can help to help people to come along that journey. And now more than ever, we need to meet people where they are, and then foster meaningful interactions that drive home the personal behaviors, the societal support that we need at this time and beyond. We have seen quite a global shift in behavior, in policy. In Kenya, drones have been outlawed for the longest time, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden, yay, drones. We've seen lawyers who said we could never do anything using technology, we could never do anything online, give verdicts, even criminal verdicts, through Zoom. So there's quite a shift, and that means there's the opportunity for new solutions, for new collaborations, for new partnerships is opening up in a way that we had, I guess, perhaps seen or thought to be near impossible, right? And one of the reasons I think this is important to mention at the top of the key is because it's really easy to forget that we do live in a continent where the opportunity to create a better future really does abound. The rhetoric in our world today can make us, I guess, jaded a little bit, or want to lean out. The number of designers that have reached out and are asking, should we pivot? Should we maybe now go become something else, or take a completely different course, because it seems like this industry is shrinking and shrinking. is growing at a concerning rate. And so I think it's really important to remember that we are not, we live on a continent where there is opportunity to innovate. And I also mentioned this to ingrain the thinking that we can't just copy paste solutions from the Western world. We've seen those work in a number of organizations, but we can't really just take them as they are and apply them to our context without really understanding the people. As Nancy said yesterday, context really does matter. While there are some similarities and there's always lessons to be learned, we must have the courage to see the potential to, thrive and tell the story of how we innovate and create solutions for ourselves, be it in agriculture, education, you name it, the opportunity does abound. This is a quote I particularly love and is just rings top of mind for me in this time. And it's a quote by Louis Downey that says that who is a design practitioner and author, that reminds us of the kind of role design can play and design us can play in helping organizations navigate the current winds of change by minimizing the time that we take for solutions that we know won't work. And helping organizations navigate that. So the potential for design to play a positive role is something that I've seen in my work right now. And in addressing some of the most pressing and fundamental challenges that we face in society is really amplified more than ever. But in order to do that, we have to consider more than just the design artifacts that we are used to and that we're used to creating, and think more broadly, right? To think more deeply about the issues that our communities, that our societies, that our organizations face. A number of folks are thinking about how to pivot, but the reality of how to go about that means that we need broader thinking than, I guess, in some ways has brought us to some of the ideas that we have now. Which means we need to engage deeply with people and communities that we design for. And to do this well, really, there's just a number of principles that come top of mind to me that we as designers have to be able to unlearn, learn, and relearn. Speaking to this idea, this notion, this mindset of agility, we often approach innovation with a solution mindset. Even in our companies, sometimes you'll hear, oh, we want to build this, and so go out and do research. But essentially what we're being asked to do sometimes is, slap a quote on it from some user somewhere that you talk to, or just add an anecdote or two that you learned during research or something of that sort. So it often feels like we've made up our minds about what needs to be done, and then all we need to do is get cracking. And I know that's definitely true from my experience when I was busy coding and just building stuff because, hey, I had an idea and I had the ability to make it real. And so we often end up, in that rat race, in that tunnel of just building. And then we come out to the world and everyone is wondering why we spent months and months on end building something that nobody wants. And the reality is that the reality that people live with might be a lot different from what we think in our own minds, which in effect means that we ourselves are locking ourselves out of relevance, out of opportunities to deliver value and create the kind of change that we would hope we are, appreciated and recognized for. Just for example, there is currently a lot of stigma around COVID-19 to the extent that people with possible infections are shying away from getting medical treatment. Some of us don't even know anybody with COVID-19 yet, but it really does affect our lives so directly and has created, like a culture of fear and mistrust. So how do we pivot our skills? How do we engage in some of those difficult conversations and difficult contexts to help, navigate the kind of solutions that we need in our time? So as designers, we really need to learn what it means to continue engaging in such a climate, and not just from a market or a user perspective, but also to be able to marry that with a strong sense of, hey, this makes business sense because A, B, C, D, or this is a sound investment dear Mr. Investor, because A, B, C, D, and design is uniquely positioned for some of these things. We saw the other day an influencer in our community who really wanted to support young people in the gig economy to continue accessing jobs through technology, right? And the gig economy is something that's going to continue to grow. And so one of the initiatives that these folks had begun creating is like this whole, digital platform where different gig workers could go on and, find jobs, whether it's carpentry or masonry or plumbing, blah, blah, blah. And what they quickly found is the people that they were targeting don't have access to internet. They don't even have mobile phones, a lot of them. And these are things that we definitely have to consider, because they do impact how we design our technology and roll out different initiatives. And I'll give an example of a project that I worked on that really brings this to life and showcases some of the failures, the pitfalls that we could possibly avoid, and really the power of what it means to drive innovation forward. And this is a project that I undertook together with Dalberg Design and CGAP to support Phoenix, who wanted to create a brand new financial service for their base of consumers who are farmers. And so the objective was really, okay, we have an idea, go make it happen. And initially we came up with different hypotheses of this and that can work, because, we've seen technology of this kind work in Zambia. We've seen this work in, Cote d'Ivoire, etc. So why don't we just start with that as basic assumptions? But we took the step back and said that we would design with the user in mind, created different personas, tried to map out what their behaviors look like. And this was incredibly, incredibly useful, mainly because when we came to creating the actual concepts, just about 80% of our assumptions ended up being wrong really early on. And if we had continued to just, advise the client, hey, we've seen this work in this country, in this context, so you go and build that, we would have been completely and utterly off base and probably fired as consultants, I guess. But we ended up with more innovation opportunities, and those innovation opportunities were framed not just in the perspective of what the market wants, but in a perspective of what the business could do. And this really allowed the clients to be able to take these recommendations forward. And they literally built the prototypes as we had designed them, because they had been tested, they had been iterated on, and went on to launch the product directly from the outputs of user research and concept design. So just when we think of design, it's like dentistry. It's a discipline, and it needs an expert to make it work. It's not just design or dentistry that saves our lives. It's people, right? It's human beings at the end of that technology. If I design a sign for a busy road junction poorly and it's unreadable, and it results in deaths or in accidents, it's not, you can't blame graphic design, right? You'll come back to me and go like, hey, chick, you messed us up. And it's the same thing for us as designers when we think about how we engage in this particular crisis. So we need to be, thinking about what are the market needs and preferences? How are those changing? And this is the reason that we see a number of organizations wanting to pivot, because they realize, okay, we were going in this direction, and our customers now, because of this pandemic, are moving in a completely different one. But if we as designers don't even understand those fundamentals, don't have, a clear view of how the world is changing, we will end up, with opportunities that are untapped and mindsets that are unadapted to shaping the kind of future that we need. The second principle is, leaning in and adapting. Guys, stay in the fight. Please, if you were thinking of leaving, we'll come for you wherever you are. So we can continue to leverage design and be engaged in this conversation, but it requires us to be present for it. And there's an opportunity in like education to deliver better learning experiences for students and equipping educators with the right, digital skills and tools to support the process now and in a post-pandemic world. In agriculture, to support supply chain, improving of supply chain inefficiencies. In e-commerce, to bring traditional brick and mortar businesses online. In finance, to improve access to financial instruments through improved processes and systems. We learned about we've heard about the banked, the unbanked, and there's so many different ways to bring solutions to people now, but it really requires us to lean into those conversations and then think creatively about how we use our existing skill sets for some of these, pressing challenges. So I would say opportunity is all around us, and we need to be the ones that adapt to it, first in mindset and then skills, and then bring our organizations and communities along for that bumpy but worthwhile ride. And there's an example of a startup called My Ride here in Kenya, who are currently doing contact tracing, enabling contact tracing and contactless payment in what is arguably one of the most critical sectors to curbing the spread of the disease, the transport industry, right? So this is an app that allows you to, track, have a conversation with people in public transportation, to be able to track your rides, to be able to report drivers that aren't, adhering to the rules. And that's become something that's incredibly important in our current dispensation. And it's an example of a startup that was agile, leaned into the crisis, and has been able to pivot and adapt its existing technology to serve a much bigger need in such an impactful way. And the reason this is important is because time is such a key resource for organizations, where every single decision counts. We've seen that with a number of the innovations that have come through. Zoom, making quick pivots in order to address consumers' concerns about safety, security, and that type of thing. And that really comes from listening to the voice of those that are outside. So how are you doing that in your organization? And how are you, I guess, set up to continue in some of these conversations in ways that an organization, your peers, your organization, your community can see and really appreciate? So as we continue to engage in these meaningful conversations and challenges, we ought to keep in mind strategies to essentially bottle these behavioral and mindset shifts, to make sure that they are embedded and sustained by individuals in their communities, in their organizations, government, and with policy change in a post-COVID-19 world, because that is coming as well. We can't just be thinking in the here and now, but also what happens when all of this is over, or when all of this becomes sustained life. We're seeing design continue to shift away from just the artifacts to people. And then success in this dispensation is measured by how we ease the human experience of the crisis, how we ease that pain for different people using the very platforms that we already exist in. Which really brings me to the next point about collaboration. Design has, always will be a team sport. And this is really important, because it almost feels like in the tech industry, like it's almost like we've done a reset in some ways, where folks are going back to that tendency of, oh, I'm just going to do this in secret. And then because resources are scarce, investors are scarce, there isn't a lot of money, so I'm just going to try and do something on my own rather than collaborate. But some of the initiatives that we've seen really prosper at this time, like supermarkets partnering with delivery services, are those that are for folks that are able to take a more collaborative mindset and a more collaborative approach to bringing solutions to the market, or to solving actual pain points and needs for folks that exist in the world. I really love this quote. I first heard it from Linnell Cameron at an event that I attended at the Autodesk headquarters, and it stayed with me many years since, because she reminds us that we are much stronger together. Because if we are going to tackle some of the challenges that we see, and it's like COVID-19 has, exposed the soft underbelly of our products, of our companies, the soft underbelly of our policies, or even our thinking in many ways. The way to approach moving forward from that isn't really by siloing and cocooning. It's by locking arms, and this is important not just as individuals but also as disciplines, right? For example, there always seems to be some kind of, I don't know, tussle or tough war between designers and developers. Who is more important? Who has, who gets the seat at the table? Who has the final say? But the truth is, you need all of these disciplines in order to bring a product to market. And this quote is really echoes that for me. So our job as designers, the job of designer is, in my view, to make the voice of the people and their needs heard at a time when a lot of people around us are sacrificing speed for the haste of there's a new app, or there's a new innovation, there's a new this, there's the new masks. But the more we're able to anchor that thinking in problems that actually exist, the better we are at using that as a springboard to even capture and attract the right talent and the right investors, and so to speak. Something that I've heard a lot now more than ever in some of the, like, I partnered with an organization of investors a couple of weeks ago to evaluate a number of companies and their thinking around some of the solutions that they're building in e-commerce, in agriculture, in education, and in the gig economy. And one of the biggest questions that kept coming up is, do these companies, do these startups, do these entrepreneurs understand who they're solving for and how that has changed or is changing? Do they understand whether this opportunity is opening up or it's shrinking? And we as designers are able to help answer that question, are able to bring insights about how human behavior is or is not changing, right? Or is not being affected by the pandemic and different initiatives in a very meaningful way. So I encourage all of us to continue leaning into that. And I will leave us with this quote from Steve Jobs. We often quote him for we often quote him for his love of tech and his love of aesthetic, but he's also the person that said that we have to start with the user experiences and the core problem and the needs of people, and then build a technology around that, rather than, okay, there's a market of 1 million businesses, so we're going to build an e-commerce platform. Okay, cool. Maybe we'll see how many of those actually get to the finish line. So in closing, don't waste this crisis. Don't waste your skills. It's really an opportunity to tap into a number of the challenges that we see. And I'm reminded that we can't change something we don't understand. We can't create solutions for sectors that we have not engaged in and have very little understanding of. And that's also true for our own businesses and our own companies. And so with that, I thank you so much for your time and your attention. If there are any other questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you for that awesome and engaging talk, Maureen. I think it was filled with awesome insights, and I can see from the comments lots of information, lots of comments. We've got 3 questions. So the first question, and this is from Magdalene. Definitely agree with that design can solve many of the world's problems, but a lot of them are in poverty-stricken areas too. Any ideas or thoughts on how to get past the digital divide?
I really love that question. And something that we've seen is, even as designers, we tend to do, like qualitative, quantitative research to understand these problems in exactly what you say, these poverty-stricken areas. And then we're hit with the fact that, okay, COVID-19 means you stay in your house, you can't really move around, and there isn't technology in some of these rural areas. And it's uncovered that as even a big challenge in getting to the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable folks in our population. So what we've done as an organization, and we continue to do research in some of these places, we have a number of local partners on the ground that we can deploy to different homesteads, etc., that have the connections to the people that we want to talk to. And then another thing we possibly want to think about is this is a great time to lobby for policy change, to lobby different organizations to build the infrastructure that's needed, because infrastructure is, it's one of those things that a lot of us feel like we have little control over. And so that's something to, think about, getting into the ears of the right people in order to make the case for reaching the most vulnerable infrastructure in terms of like the internet, electricity, mobile phone and mobile phone usage and penetration, by giving access or improved access for that to various vulnerable communities, is kind of like a couple of strategies that we've seen work with some organizations currently.
Thank you. I hope that answers, or gives you the answer, Magdalene. The next question is from James. What were some of the differences between countries and behaviors in your financial service project?
What are the differences between countries and behaviors? This particular project was done in one country. We did it in Uganda, and since then we've done a lot of work in Kenya, in Zambia. There's differences in terms of gender and access to financial instruments. There's in terms of preferences. In some cases, the person that makes decisions about finances in the household is not the female, it's the male, but the person that has the mobile phone is the female, because she's always, outside or in the farms. There's differences in terms of access to technology, education levels, literacy, across countries, even in terms of behaviors in smaller pockets. So I think that's a very broad question, but those are some of the indicators that we tend to look at. I see one last question here, which says, what's the best way to start designing for someone with a developer background, I guess? So I was fortunate to have an ecosystem of support, and I'm pretty sure you have that too. So we have to be able to look at, like, for example, if you wanted to learn how to design, you might think of reaching out to a designer and being a member of their communities, and then learning through that, which is exactly what I did. I found the design community where it was very small. It was actually 2 people at the iHub, and I joined them and I started learning from them, almost like by apprenticeship, kind of. And then because I was building a solution, I was taking some of those learnings and I was applying them in real time to what I was building. So instead of writing code today, I would go out and talk to people, and then I would come and write code tomorrow that's based off of what I've actually understood. So I would say, be part of an ecosystem, be part of a society, be part of a community, and then find ways to apply practically what it is that you're learning from different people is a great strategy to start anything. And lastly, don't give up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I don't think there's any more questions. If there are any more questions, you can reach out to Maureen via LinkedIn, profiles on our site. She'll be here for quite a while still. So please chat if you have any more questions. But for now, thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you again for the talk. And thank you, everybody, for the engagement and the questions. We'll be jumping into the next session shortly. But you can probably stretch your legs for another 2 minutes or so, and then we'll move to the next session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.